Welcome back to the channel. No, it's not Friday. You get a bonus video this week. So there's a lot that goes into these builds that you don't see, and part of it is where my parts come from. This one happened to be a parts car. So I'm going to show you what I do with my parts cars. First we're going to get it running, and then we're going to save what parts we need to save, and throw the rest in the pile. Now it was a rollover, so the engine is hydrolocked, so I'll show you how to unlock a hydrolock motor. It's full of oil, not water this time. First things first, let's see if we can get it running. So since oil is all over the hood, headlight, and in the cylinders, not in the crankcase where it belongs, we're going to have to fill up the oil first. Because when the engine does start, if it's any good, we don't want to ruin it. So now we're going to pull the air baffle off the top. There's some of that oil we were missing. This thing is full. So we'll pull the cover off the top. Now we can get to our coils and spark plugs. So we'll unbolt all the coils. Pop them out. And we'll pull all the plugs out. Found a little oil. And that's not even a bad one. So put the oil cap back on, and we'll crank it over and push some of that oil out. Make a little oil fountain. So there's still a lot in there, in cylinder number 3. So we're going to put 2 plugs back in and plug in the coils. Give it a little help. Now that's a real oil fountain. So we'll put the other 2 plugs back in. Plug our coils back in. Put our intake back on so our mass airflow sensor can somewhat read. It's soaked in oil and they don't like that. So, it's running. It's not good, but it's running. Apparently, when it locked up one of those cylinders, it bent one of the connecting rods. So we got a little bit of a noise. We also have no mosquitoes in the neighborhood. My neighbors love me. But there was only one way to find out if that engine was good. It ended up quieting down after the connecting rod finally wore away at the block, and it ran just fine. I did drive it off the trailer and back it into the garage, just to make sure the transmission was fine. And yes, it is missing one wheel. Everything is drivable if you're brave enough. So now it's time to start cutting it up. First we're going to pull the doors off, and we'll pull the front bumper off. Pull the headlight out. Pull the other headlight out. Now I can remove the fender. And remove the other fender. We're going to need this front end for our other terrain from the previous videos. Pull our hood off. I'm just going to take the hinges and everything. And we start taking the front door off. It's easier to do with the fender out of the way. That's why I waited on that door. Now we can unbolt our seats and pull them out of there. Pull our battery out. Start disconnecting our washer bottle. Disconnect the wiring harness from the front. We're going to save all the clips off the fender. These come in handy. And we'll throw the fenders in the pile. We'll drain all the antifreeze out of the radiator. I already had it at the shop and evacuated the AC. Pull the other door off. Pull the door panel off of it. These are Denali specific door panels. So we're going to do the same thing with the other doors. We'll save what's good in them. There's not really much good in them other than the door panels. This one has a good molding, which is also Denali specific. Pretty expensive, so we'll save it. One more door. Save that molding off the bottom. Now we'll save the door panel. This one had a good door glass, and I was running low on these door glasses, so I saved it. Probably so I had an excuse to use my favorite tool. Jack it up so we can get underneath it. Put our non-Harbor Freight jack stands underneath it. Safety first. Pull the tires off. Pull the reinforcement off. Disconnect the rest of the AC and trans lines. And now we can start pulling our suspension off. Take the strut out. And we'll take the rest of the knee assembly out. I'll do the same thing on the driver's side. Now we'll climb underneath, start disconnecting our exhaust. We'll drain all of our fluids, just so when our engine and trans are on our shelves, they're not leaking all over the place. So now we'll lower the truck down a little bit. We'll start disconnecting the rest of the cooling system. The radiator and condenser out of the way. Now we'll lower the truck all the way down. We're basically going to set the whole drivetrain down on a rolling cart. We'll disconnect all of our wires, shift linkage, pull the upper tie bar off. Disconnect our heater hoses, our electrical box. Got some AC lines back there. Now we'll disconnect the engine and trans mounts. Disconnect the subframe from the body. And now we're ready to lift the body up. Slide the engine and trans out the front. And raise the body up to where we can work on it. Pull that driver's seat out that we unbolted. Start taking the console and dash out. I need the actual plastic dash piece. So that's why I'm taking it apart, because it does come out as an assembly. But it's easier to take it apart here than on a stand. So I'm going to take out what I need, save everything else. I need everything off this firewall so I can get these frame rails off. For other terrain that's actually in the background. I did this in my free time. Wasn't in a hurry to get my own car done. So whenever I had a little bit of extra time, I did a little more on this truck. So eventually, it was all ready to go. And when I had all my parts off, I was ready to work on the other truck. That's why I did this at home. So it just proves you don't need a fancy shop to rebuild cars, but it helps. So here's the stash plastic I actually needed for another build. Now we can pull the rest of it out. Roll the carpet back. So now we get to our frame rails. Links up above if you want to see this in a little more detail. We're going to pull these off. We're actually saving those. And now it's time to get rid of everything else we don't need, because the rest of it really isn't any good. So you keep the jack stands further back and then cut the front. Use the weight of the pieces to bend them down, so you cut from the top down. That way you don't have the saw binding up. Now we're going to take all of the electronics and put them in the box so we can save them in case we want to sell them. The carpeting out and all the trim panels. Pull the headliner down. Pull the sun visors out. So now we're going to go underneath, start disconnecting our fuel lines, vapor canister, and fuel tank. Pull out our fuel and brake lines. And now we can start dropping our rear suspension. What's left of it anyway. The left side was completely ripped off. So we dropped the subframe and the right suspension and everything. Now we start cutting up the rest. Cut our B-pillars off. Cut those from the bottom up. Because of the way it was on the jack stands, it kind of folded up, kept it from binding. Got that piece out of the way. I can move it forward so we can open the lift gate. Take the rear bumper off. Got the lift gate out of our way. Now we're ready to cut the roof off. In the pile. Now we're going to save this piece. It's got some good frame rails and a trunk floor. Pretty common on these things for them to bend when they get hit in the back end. So if I get one, I'll be able to use it. If not, and I get tired of looking at it, I'll toss it. So that's what about 80% of a Terrain looks like in the back of an 8-foot bed pickup truck. We used what we needed, we saved what was still good, and this is everything going to the scrapyard. So now you can probably see why I bought a dump trailer. Because before I used to have to cut the car up into little pieces, hand load it in the back of my truck, drive it to the scrapyard, and then hand unload it out of the back of my truck. Now, I just load a mostly complete vehicle in the back of my trailer, drive it over to the scrapyard, and press a button. So this trailer saves me a lot of time and saves my back. It was worth every penny I paid for it. So I hope this video gave you a little insight into what goes on that you don't normally see. If it did, give it a like. Subscribe to see whatever I have coming up next. And as always, thanks for watching. I'll see you Friday.